بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وبعد. Welcome to the second lesson of this series looking at إسعاف المريدين في إقامة فرائض الدين by الشيخ عبد الغني الغنيمي الميداني رحمه الله تعالى ورضي عنه. And we are going to start the book with this lesson inshallah, so we'll jump straight into it bi'idhnillah. And as we mentioned, this book it's authored, or it was authored I should say, for those who are starting their journey in studying fiqh, and in more particular the Hanafi school of fiqh, although it is suitable for those that would like to remind themselves to revise that which they've previously studied. So he starts it with the intention of introducing the potential students to that which is most important to them in the beginning of their journey, traversing the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we're going to start with his introduction, and he will explain inshallah further that which I've just clarified. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And so as is the tradition of all of these scholars of Islam, he starts with the Basmala and the Hamdalah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, anything that is of importance which is not started with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim or the Basmala of some variation, it is deficient in its barakah, in its blessings. And likewise there are various ahadith similar to that which mention the Hamdalah. And then he sends his salutations upon the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, and the family of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, أما بعد فيقول العبد الفقير الجاني عبد الغني الغنيمي الميداني وفقه مولاه لما يرضاه وتولى رشده وهداه. He says, to continue, the impoverished servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Abdul Ghani al-Ghunaymi al-Maydani, وفقه مولاه لما يرضاه, may his Lord, i.e. he's speaking about himself, but he's speaking about himself from the perspective of one who is in need. And that is the reality for all of us. If this is the way of our ulama, then this should be our way, a way of humility and a way of seeing ourselves as deficient and dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in that which we are specialized within. This is his speciality. Fiqh was his speciality. He studied with some of the greatest of scholars of his time in his region, Sham, and from them Ibn Abidin rahimahullah ta'ala, but yet he still sees and realizes that he is dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything that he is in need of, that which he wants to carry out. So he says, may his Lord grant him success in that which is pleasing to his Lord, and may his Lord take the responsibility for his guidance and his success. And this is something that we should reflect upon, that we are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance, and we should always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to that which is better for us, according to that which is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person may want something, a person may desire something, but that thing may not be good for him. And there is a scholarly argument: is the impoverished slave better, or the wealthy slave, i.e. the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is the impoverished servant of Allah who is patient upon poverty better, or the wealthy servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who spends his wealth in that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the essence of this argument is understanding that that which Allah has decreed for you is better for you, even if you do not see it at the time. A person may become a tyrant if wealthy, and so Allah decrees for him poverty. Whereas a person who is wealthy may become a tyrant if impoverished, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for him wealth. That's the way we should look at this dunya. What we have is what is best for us, and we are in the situations that we find ourselves in for a reason. It's tarbiyah ilahiyya. It is a godly nurturing. Then he says, هذه ورقات قليلة أرجو من فضل الله تعالى أن تكون بالنفع جزيلة أذكر فيها فرائض الدين وواجباته على عامة المؤمنين قد التمسها مني بعض المحبين والإخوان الصادقين وسميتها إسعاف المريدين لإقامة فرائض الدين. So he basically says that this is a small treatise introducing the fara'id, that which is compulsory upon us of the pillars and the arkan of Iman and so on and so forth. The reason I have authored it is it was a request put to me by some of those who I know to be sincere and people that are beloved to me. And again, just a point to reflect upon, you'll find that this is often the case in many introductions by the authors of Islam. They mention that they are authoring the particular books that they authored because those books were requested from them. Whereas in our time today, we author because we believe that we should author. We believe that we have the ability and we put ourselves to the forefront. And there is sometimes a positive in that, but the way of our ulama is humility. The way of our ulama was to look for that which was needed, that which was beneficial, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes it's about what is required, not what is about what is wanted. And we sometimes like to pursue that which we want rather than that which is required. When we look at our situation today, what are we in need of? What do we require to change our situation, to rectify our situation, rather than what we want? Many of the scholarly discussions that take place today, many of the debates and the debacles that take place between peers and those who are learned and those who are unlearned, are they necessary? Are they contributing towards a positive change within our communities? Or are they merely what we want, what we desire, showing off our academic muscles, reassuring ourselves, making ourselves feel secure intellectually, and so on and so forth. So he says, he called it إسعاف المريدين لإقامة فرائض الدين, the seeker's aid in establishing that which is compulsory of the deen. And so the title indicates the context. He says, فأقول أول فرض على كل مكلف. So he's going to jump straight into the text now. He says the first act which is compulsory upon every person who has reached the legal age of taklif, wherein this person would be deemed to be responsible. And according to the fuqaha, it means a person has reached the age of puberty and is sound in his mind, his intellect, his capacity to understand. He's sound-minded. He says, al-imanu wal-islam. So Iman and Islam. And he's going to tell us what Iman and Islam are. وهما لفظان متلازمان غير أن الإيمان وظيفة الجنان والإسلام وظيفة الأركان. So he says that they are two terms which have a very similar meaning when they are mentioned separately, and when they come together they have a more distinct meaning to each term. And that is, Iman is that which relates to the heart, and Islam is that which relates to the limbs, i.e. the arkan, the 5 pillars of Islam. He's going to explain in further detail, but a point to reflect upon here, when he says the أول فرض على كل مكلف, that which is compulsory upon each person who reaches the age of puberty and is sound in mind, is Iman and Islam. And this is the job of the parents, the job of the elders. When our children reach an age of understanding, an age of puberty, an age of legal responsibility, it is a crucial time, and of course we should start this prior to them reaching that age, but we need to introduce them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a center point for them in their lives. And it's not only about, perhaps here the author he's speaking in a more technical sense, and that's a part of it, but we need to think in a spiritual sense as well, having Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a meaningful existence in our lives. What does that mean? What would that mean to our children? How can we bring this about? How can we develop projects that will bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence into the lives of our young? We live in a world full of distractions, full of entertainment, full of confusion, and we need to keep our young people anchored, our youth anchored, ourselves anchored with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the direction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very, very important. It's crucial, in fact, to the existence of our nation, our ummah in these times, and the success of our akhirah and the akhirah of our young people. And we often take the education of the young very seriously. Do we take their deen as seriously as we take their education? Do we take their salah? Do we take their hajj? Do we take their understanding of trade and transaction seriously? Do we take their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seriously? Do we teach them about the sicknesses of the heart? Do we teach them about good akhlaq? Do we teach them about that which defined the Prophet ﷺ and the companions? Do Do they know the Sahaba? Do they know the Tabi'een? Do they know the champions of Islam, whether male or female, that came before us? We have so many young people looking up to celebrities and idols and sports stars, etc. Have we provided them with an understanding of their lineage, their heritage? The heritage of Islam is every Muslim's heritage. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, Tariq bin Ziyad, Umar al-Mukhtar, all of these individuals, they are our champions, they are our heritage. And a lion comes from a lineage of lions. And so we should allow our young people to know who they are so that they can aspire to be like those who came before us. It's a very, very important point, and we need to reflect upon this, and perhaps these times wherein we're at home with our children, more so than other times, is a good starting point. Then he mentions كما جاء مفسرا أو مفسرا في حديث جبريل عليه السلام حيث قال أخبرني عن الإسلام أخبرني عن الإيمان. So he mentions the hadith of Jibreel wherein Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu and he said to the Prophet alayhi salam, teach me about Islam, akhbirni an al-Islam. And the Prophet alayhi salam, he said that Islam is to say the shahadatain, to establish the prayer, to perform or to fast in the month of Ramadan, to give zakat, to perform hajj, etc. Then he said, tell me about Iman, and he mentioned the 6 pillars of Iman, which we're going to go into in some slight detail, inshallah. So he's using that hadith to distinguish between Islam and Iman. And of course, the third category mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ in that hadith is the category of ihsan. And he replied with, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. To worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you do not see Him, you know that He subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. And in order for you to know that He sees you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be firmly established within the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be rooted in your existence. And that ihsan is the category of akhlaq, of tazkiyah, tasawwuf, suluk, etc. And so these are 3 areas, 3 elements we should focus on. The element of the arkan, i.e. understanding of the implementation of Islam practically and physically. The understanding of iman, i.e. the aqaid, the theology, the philosophy of Islam. And the area of ihsan, so the character traits that we should adopt, the sicknesses of the heart and the cures for those sicknesses, and the virtuous, meritorious character traits of the soul and the heart that we should live to and aspire to adopt. These are the 3 areas that we need to focus upon to develop a holistic understanding of Islam and application of Islam. And these are the 3 areas we need to focus on within our communities. But when you look to the groups of Islam today, perhaps you will find that some groups focus on particular areas without focusing on other areas, whilst other groups focus on the areas not focused on by others without focusing on other particular areas, etc. And we want to adopt a method wherein we focus on all of the areas of Islam which are practical and applicable, etc. He then goes on to explain now the pillars of Iman, and he defines Iman, then he defines Islam, then he goes on to explain. He says, فَأَمَّا الْإِيمَانِ فَالتَّصْدِيقُ بِالْقَلْبِ بِمَا جَاءَ بِهِ النَّبِيُّ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ عَنِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وهو الإيمان بالله تعالى وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر كله خيره وشره من الله تعالى. He says, as for Iman, its meaning, i.e. its definition, it is conviction of the heart of that which the Prophet ﷺ came with, which is Iman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so complete belief and conviction in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His angels, His books, i.e. the books of revelation sent to the prophets, His messengers, the day of resurrection or the last day, the day of judgment, the preordination of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which Allah has decreed, and he says khayrihi wa sharrihi, that which is good and that which is perceived to be evil or wicked, and to believe that all of it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now he's going to go in depth into the 6 areas that he mentioned. So he starts with إيمان in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثم الإيمان بالله تعالى هو التصديق بأنه موجود. So he says to have Iman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to have conviction firstly of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence. And the second area he mentions, wajibul wujud, that He is, it's impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do anything other than exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wajibul wujud. His existence is pre-eternal. His existence has no beginning, has no end, and it is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not exist. And to understand it slightly, you can think about something which is mumkin al-wujud, something which it could exist and it at the same time may not exist, something which could come into existence but it's not something which would definitely have to be in existence, such as ourselves. We are mumkin al-wujud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created us or could have chose not to create us. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wajib al-wujud. It is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be anything except in existence. Muttasifun bil qidam, and He is pre-eternal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning and no end. And we're going to discuss this in small detail once we get to the end, inshallah. Wal baqa, He is everlasting, ever living. Wal wahdaniyya, and He is one and unique. You have to believe in His oneness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's uniqueness. There is nothing like Him, and it is impossible to even conceptualize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like. Wal qiyam bi nafsihi, and He is self-sufficient, self-subsistence. Wal mukhalafa, or He believe in His self-subsistence, I should say. Wal mukhalafati lil hawadith, and He is different from that which is created. So that which would be considered an accident in the philosophical sense, He is different to all creations, as all creations come from Him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is different and unique to all of His creation. So just to reflect upon this briefly, to understand what He is saying, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is impossible for us to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like. It is impossible for us to conceptualize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound by that which bounds us, i.e. the creation. We live within the boundaries and the remit of the creation, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound to that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His existence is unlike His creation. And so even when we try to conceptualize, when we try to imagine, when we try to reflect over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is impossible for us to even conceptualize. So when we think about these things, a person may ask, how is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pre-eternal? How is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning and no end? We are thinking within the capacity of our existence. We are thinking within the realm of our existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound to that which we are bound to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound to time as we are bound to time. Allah created time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound to positions and so on and so forth. He created those things. And so when we try to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will never be able to fully comprehend, and we do not have the capacity to even start to do so. So it's important that we understand this. And when we are reading about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we simply submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence and to everything that He has informed us of about Himself, either through the Quran or the Prophet ﷺ. And the point that needs to be reflected upon when discussing with non-Muslims is not the nature of Allah's existence, but the evidence of Allah's existence. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence proves to be true, then submission to that which He wants from us is the next step. And of course we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence, and we believe in that which the Prophet ﷺ came with, and so we submit to the message of Islam, and we adopt that which Allah has informed us to adopt in His Quran, in the prophetic traditions, and we try to live a life pleasing to Him. Then He says, لَهُ ذَاتٌ لَا تُشْبِهُ الذَّوَاتِ وَصِفَاتٌ لَا تُشْبِهُ الصِّفَاتِ. So just as was mentioned, He has an essence which is unlike anything in creation, an essence which is not like the essences of the creation, and attributes which are unlike the attributes of the creation. They may be similar to the attributes of creation in name, for example, but in reality they are completely different. The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are unique to Him. Then He says, فَمِن صِفَاتِ ذَاتِهِ الْعَلِيَّةِ الْحَيَاةُ وَالْعِلْمُ وَالْقُدْرَةُ وَالْإِرَادَةُ وَالسَّمْعُ وَالْبَصْرُ وَالْكَلَامُ الَّذِي لَيْسَ بِحَرْفٍ وَلَا صَوْتٍ. He says, from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the glorious attributes of Allah, number 1, life. Number 2, ilm, knowledge. Number 3, al-qudra, so the complete ability and capability over all things. Wal-irada, complete will. Was-sam', hearing, والبصر, sight, والكلام الذي ليس بحرف ولا صوت, and speech which is unlike the speech of the creation. And the author, he says, ليس بحرف ولا صوت, it is not made up of letters nor of sounds, i.e. it cannot be made similar to that which we understand to be speech. Our speech depends on letters, depends on sounds, depends on airwaves, depends on so many things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech is not dependent on any of those things. And so when we try to comprehend the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, we will be limited to the scope of our existence. And so we will not be able to comprehend. Then he says, فَهُوَ حَيٌّ عَلِيمٌ قَادِرٌ مُرِيدٌ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ مُتَكَلِّمٌ. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alive, He is all knowledgeable, He is all capable, He is willed, He has willpower, not willpower, but He has a will, meaning He wants that which happens by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sami', He is hearing, Basir, He is all seeing, all hearing, Mutakallim, and He speaks subhanahu wa ta'ala. ويستحيل عليه تعالى أضداد هذه الصفات وكل وصف لا يليق بتلك الذات العلية. And it is impossible for any of these attributes to the opposite of the attributes mentioned to be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a person could never describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything in opposition to that which we have mentioned. Likewise, anything excuse me, which would be deemed as debasing or depreciating from the state of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the creator of all things. وَيَجُوزُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى فِعْلُ كُلِّ مُمْكِنٍ وَتَرْكُ. And it is possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries out everything which could exist, and at the same time it's possible that He leaves those things which could exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have not created us, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have chosen not to create the universe and the creation that we find ourselves within, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did choose to create those things. And just a point upon that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His attributes are not dependent upon His actions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-khaliqu bila khalq, without creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator without the existence of creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to create in order to be referred to as the creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to provide in order to be referred to as Ar-Razzaq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sustainer, Ar-Razzaq, even if there is nothing in existence to be provided and sustained for. So it's important to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes are not dependent upon His actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes are pre-eternal, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence is pre-eternal. He says, وَالْإِيمَانُ بِالْكُتُبِ. So now he's going to go on to the next pillar of Iman, which is belief in the books. He says, هو التصديق بجميع كتب الله تعالى المنزلة على أنبيائه عليهم الصلاة والسلام وأنها كلام الله تعالى. So it is to believe in all of the books, all of the revealed scriptures sent to His prophets. And His prophets, of course, being from Adam alayhi salam all the way until the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So we believe in the revealed scriptures, that which was sent, for example, to Musa alayhi salam, to Isa alayhi salam, to Ibrahim alayhi salam, to Dawood alayhi salam, and of course the seal of the prophets, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. And it is considered the Quran, i.e. an abrogation of all that came before it. It is an attestation, an affirmation, at the same time an abrogation. So it affirms that which relates to the aqa'id mentioned, the theology mentioned in the previous scriptures, but it abrogates that which relates to law. The prophets, for example, when Isa alayhi salam returns, he will follow the law of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, that which came in the Quran, etc. And we should believe that all of it is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there are some discussions on this. The ulama, they go into this, etc. in great detail. لا تفاوت فيها إلا بالنفع والخصائص. And there is no difference in these revealed scriptures except in distinguishing qualities, you could say, which distinguish between the various books. وأفضلها القرآن العظيم وهو ناسخ للجميع ولا ينسخ ولا يبدل مدى الأزمان. And he says the best of these revealed scriptures, Al-Quran, the great Quran, وهو ناسخ للجميع, as we said, it is an abrogation of all that came before it. ولا ينسخ, it will never be abrogated, so nothing will ever replace it. ولا يبدل مدى الأزمان, until the end of time. The Quran is the final book revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should consider that a great blessing and a great honor that we are the people of the last nation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the qualities of our nation is that it is open for all. Anyone can enter into Islam. Anyone can become a believer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a believer of the Prophets. They simply have to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and openly proclaim, of course, their submission and follow the scripture revealed to us, i.e. the Quran. And then he says, وَالْإِيمَانُ بِالرُّسُلِ. So now he's going to go on to belief in the messengers. هُوَ التَّصْدِيقُ بِأَنَّهُمْ أَفْضَلُ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ. So firstly, conviction of the heart to be convinced and to believe that they are the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's servants. وَأَفْضَلُهُمْ سَيِّدُنَا مُحَمَّدٌ سَيِّدُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُهُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. And the best of them, of course, the master of all of the prophets, the final messenger, Muhammad alayhi salam, and he is the master of creation, in the sense that we all follow his way as he was guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the final messenger, and a blessing for all of us. وَأَنَّهُمْ عُقَلَاء. Number one, to believe in the fact that they are all highly intelligent. All of the prophets were highly intelligent, completely sound. أُمَنَاء, and completely trustworthy. مُبَلِّغُونَ مَا أُمِرُوا بِتَبْلِيغِهِ. They conveyed that which they were commanded to convey. They did not leave out any minute details. That which the Prophet ﷺ came with and that which remained behind after he passed away ﷺ was the complete message of Islam. Nothing was left behind. مَعْصُومُونَ مِنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ حِسِّي. And they are protected ومعنوي مخل بمقامهم الشريف. They are protected from carrying out anything which would be considered a tangible or non-tangible deficiency, that which would be considered a blemish in them, and that which would lower their status, debase them in any way. وَيَسْتَحِيلُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَضْدَادُ هَذِهِ الصِّفَاتِ. And it's impossible for the opposite of that which was mentioned to be attributed to them. وتجوز عليهم الأعراض البشرية التي لا تؤدي إلى نقص في مراتبهم العالية كالأكل والجوع والنكاح والأمراض الغير الدنية. And it is possible that they engage in human characteristics which do not debase them or take away from their glorious status. And with that, inshallah, we will conclude this lesson, and we will resume with the next lesson, inshallah, looking at the other pillars of Iman. وَصَلِّ اللَّهُمَّ عَلَى سَيِّدِنَا مُحَمَّدٍ وَعَلَى آلِهِ وَأَصْحَابِهِ أَجْمَعِينَ.